Hello and welcome back to the Vicarage study for a reading and reflection for Maundy Thursday. The reading is from John 13 verses 1 to 17 and 31b to 35. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the mind of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not now know what I am doing, but later you will understand. Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and for this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After this, he washed their feet and put on his robe, and had returned to the table and said to them, "Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your teacher and Lord, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. For I have set you as an example, that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their masters, nor are messengers greater than the ones who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him at once, and will glorify himself. "Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, because you have love one for another." May my words and our thoughts be now and always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. Last Sunday, Palm Sunday, we remembered the journey that we walk from the Lich Gate to the church, and the way in which it represents the journey of the donkey through Jerusalem and the journey of the cross to Calvary. But as Jesus says in our reading for today, we cannot go with Jesus for the whole of that journey. Where I am going, you cannot come, he says. The journey leads to the cross and to death. And it's at this moment that he's going to say goodbye to those whom he loves and carry on alone. And so, as he gathers with his friends at the Last Supper, this last meal that they will eat together, he teaches them what they will have to do after he's gone. "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you." That word commandment would have had a very specific meaning for the Jews, for the disciples. Moses brought the 10 Commandments down from Mount Sinai in Exodus, and they're at the heart of the Jewish faith. Now Jesus is giving his disciples an 11th commandment. Love one another. It's reminiscent of those words which Paul wrote much later in 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. There is no substitute for love. No amount of commandment keeping or prophecy can make up for the lack of it. Jesus is about to leave his friends, not because he wants to, but because he has to. And as he leaves them, he gives them the gift of each other. The Last Supper and the conversations that Jesus has with his disciples there help us to understand how real this parting was for them. It's easy for us looking back with the benefit of hindsight, saying, yes, but it was fine because he rose from the dead. It wasn't fine, not for the disciples and not for Jesus. Jesus had to go through an agonizing death, and the disciples had to lose him. This was going to be very real to them. This is the moment with the disciples that Jesus has been building up to for his whole ministry. He needs to connect them to each other so they can love and support one another after him. This is important not only for itself, but also because they're going to need to start the early church together without his earthly presence. If they're going to do that, they need to love one another. They're not necessarily going to like one another all the time, but they need to be filled with a deep love, which means they can work together and live together through all the ups and downs of life. These past few weeks have been a time for reflecting on our relationships with those whom we love, those we live with, those we speak to on phone or Skype. Perhaps there's been more time for proper conversations, the ones that you tend not to find time for in the day-to-day of ordinary life. Perhaps there's been more time to annoy one another about whose turn it is to use the bathroom or make tea. In the ebb and flow of relationships, we're focused more intently at the moment on those closest to us. And so Jesus' words, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you," remind us of the nature of love. To love one another is to be committed to each other, to seek the best for each other, even when we find each other annoying. The disciples didn't always get on. There were many stories in the Gospels about their bickering with each other about this and that. But the love that Jesus is asking for from them surpasses all of that. The love that he models perfectly when he gives his life for us on the cross. And Jesus asks not only that we love those closest to us, but also that we love people in the wider world, in our communities. Those little acts of kindness which have been so important over the last few weeks as we've gone through this extraordinary time together. And so on this Maundy Thursday, as he has his Last Supper with his friends, Jesus reminds us of the greatest commandment, the new commandment to love one another as he loves us. And as we remember that commandment, we give thanks for all those whom we love. We also remember Jesus' commandment to love our fellow human beings, whoever and wherever they may be, as we set our faces towards the cross and the days to come. Amen.